kgranger.house.gov. KayGranger.house.gov / and there's the rest of it, weekly newsletter or something. Weekly e-newsletter. This was created on March 30th, 2012. An executive order you should know about. Congresswoman Kay Granger. What's this? Dear friend, with all that is going on in Washington these days, some things don't make the news the way they should. 14 days ago, President Obama issued an executive order that you should know about. This order gives an unprecedented level of authority to the President and the federal government to take over all the fundamental parts of our economy in the name of national security in times of a national emergency. And by the way, Ms. Granger, there's quite a bit of language in that same executive order you're referring to, non-national emergencies, which means like any time now could happen. But nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and finish reading this. This means all of our water resources, construction services and materials, steel, concrete, etc., our civil transportation system, food and health resources, our energy supplies, including oil and natural gas, even farm equipment, can be taken over by the President and his cabinet secretaries. The government can also draft U.S. citizens into the military and force U.S. citizens to fulfill, quote, labor requirements for the purposes of national defense. There is not even any congressional oversight, only briefings are required. By issuing this as an executive order, the President puts the federal government above the law, which in a democracy is never supposed to happen. As President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, he has the constitutional authority to issue executive orders. And while similar orders have been made before by presidents from Eisenhower and Reagan to Clinton and George Bush, it has never been done to this extent. It is still unclear why this order was signed now and what the consequences are for our nation, especially during times of peace. In other words, why is this being signed into law or executive order now during a time of peace? Nothing on the horizon. This type of martial law imposes a government takeover on U.S. citizens that is typically reserved for national emergencies, not in a time of relative peace. I want you to know I am following this very closely. If you would like to read the executive order for yourself, please click here. Sincerely, Kay Granger, Member of Congress. You know, she's probably a conspiracy theorist. She's probably a nut job. I would pay no attention to that. You know, Congresswoman, nah. This is probably a fake story. This is probably one of my emails I just send to people. Some bozos I happen to know, very few, but I do know some, that think I'm just this crazy conspiracy nut. Everything I talk about is conspiracy. It's not true. Come on, wake up. This is ridiculous. And all the crap that I've been talking about over all these years, get ready for this, get ready for that. It's coming. This is why they passed that law. This is why 9/11 happened. This is why they do this, etc. And by the way, if you haven't seen the Alex Jones interview from a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago or so, can't remember the lady's name, eyewitness, lived inside the catastrophe of Oklahoma City bombing, has an amazing story to tell. It'll remind you of the 9/11 scandal. It'll remind you of the Iran-Contra scandal, Waco, Ruby Ridge. It'll remind you of all that stuff. And you're going to see the same pattern every time you see those things. Agents involved. She identifies some of them. And then the FBI has the nerve to say, you didn't see that person. It's not what you saw. We just want to let you know the eyewitness you identified is not the right person. They look similar to this FBI agent. Turns out to be FBI agent you saw. But it's not the FBI agent because that person wasn't here. Oh, okay. Which kind of reminds me of the lady on 9/11 in near Shanksville, Virginia, where the alleged Flight 93 crashed. And she claims, eyewitness, she's driving, minding her own business, listening to the radio, and this very small, very silent type of aircraft is so low it could hit a light pole. She could see the belly of the craft coming under her. She thought it was going to crash right in front of her. She slams on the brakes, terrified. And at the last minute, there's a tree line. It picks up, noses goes up, it just clears the tree line, clears it, she can't see it anymore, and then boom, large explosion. She runs out of her car, knocks on the nearest house, no answer. Gets back in her car, and right where she's at's a stop sign, makes a right, next first house, runs out frantically, knocks on the door. A lady answers, "Oh my God, did you hear the news?" She goes, "No, but I just saw it. A plane crashed." And the other lady's like, "Yes, I know. It hit the Twin Towers. Another plane. There's 2 planes have hit the Twin Towers." She says, "No, the plane just crashed out in the field." And the other lady's like, "No, it hit the Twin Towers." And she's like, "No, it hit that's why I'm coming here." So they look over there. Sure enough, there's a big pile of smoke coming up. Oh my God, there's 3 accidents or something. Fine. So she tells, the FBI comes, investigates. Mind you, there was never any luggage at Flight 93 site. There were no body parts. There were no blood. There were no airplane parts. There was just a little bit of scattered debris. That's it. When the coroner gets on site, he's first quoted as saying, "I don't even know why I'm here." What do you mean? There's nothing, there's no bodies, there's no blood, there's nothing here. And then he had to retract the statement later, of course. But this lady gave, 2 FBI agents came to speak with me about what I saw. And they're trying to convince me that I saw a very large or different type of aircraft, and that I don't know what a 747 looks like, apparently, because that's what crashed. And I told the FBI agents, "Don't you dare be condescending to me. I know the size and kind of aircraft that I saw, and it was by no means as large as a 747. This was like a small type of aircraft, like a Cessna or something. It had no markings. It was completely white. There was nothing on it." Naturally, she probably saw a Predator drone or something small like that flying. Having said that, she was told by the FBI, "What you saw, you didn't see. Thank you for your eyewitness testimony. Have a nice day." And she says, as one of them's walking out, he turns to her very seriously and says, "Ma'am, please don't give up on your government. Have faith in us, please." In other words, the way she took it was like, "I know I'm lying to you about what you saw. You really saw it, but due to like national security, problems, issues, this is the story we're going to run with. Trust that your government is making the story up on purpose for the benefit of the Americans." That's how she took that story, and I think that's how she explained it. Can't remember her name because it's been so long since I've watched that little video. And it was from a person who met her somehow and asked if he could do a interview with her, and they spent about an hour interviewing her, taking them down to the sites. "Okay, I was parked right here. This is that telephone pole that I told you it was like practically about to hit into. Right there's the tree line. Here's the stop sign. Here's the first house that I ran out frantically. No one answered. I went through the stop sign, made a right. There's the house. I spoke with the other lady." I mean, just pristine information. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because the FBI, you didn't see that. You don't know what a 747 looks like. You saw a 747, not a little small aircraft. Have a nice day. Same thing happens on Oklahoma City. You didn't see this FBI agent. I think you misread or looked at him, whatever, and came up with the wrong conclusion, because this person you identified as being here, that you saw parked in this parking space talking to another person with some kind of wires and putty looking device, looks similar to this FBI agent that happens to work for us, but it wasn't him. And he was in Texas the whole time. He wasn't in Oklahoma City. And then, and I don't know if it was a Freedom of Information Act or somehow they subpoenaed some information. Oh, actually that agent was in fact in Oklahoma City that morning. Records show it. Oh, okay, yeah. So that's why I'm telling you that. So why, and I'm gonna make another little prediction, and I'm gonna call it a prediction, but it's not necessarily like I'm gonna stand by it and say, I told you, you know, I know this is gonna happen. I'm just going to put it like this. If something happens, then this will happen. That's how this prediction is gonna work. If this new SIPA or CISPA, whatever this thing is called, for the internet lockdown, that was better or worse than the other two things they tried to pass in Congress that failed, and this new one's coming up, I believe, for vote next week, if memory serves me right, it's far worse than the other ones for internet lockdown and loss of our freedoms, etc., regarding the internet. If they cannot pass it, they've already tried before, they've added some new draconian things to it, it's far worse. If they cannot and do not pass this, because it can't pass due to Congress people, I guess enough of them being awake to not pass it, mark my words, we will have an attack on the internet. It'll be by the CIA, the government, whoever, whatever branch you want to call it, I don't know. They will do it, just like they did 9/11, just like they did Oklahoma City, just like they do everything so that they can pass laws, as Timothy Geithner said, quote, we can pass laws that we normally couldn't pass in a time of emergency, such as this, you know, economic failure that just occurred. Word for word, basically, out of Timothy Geithner's mouth. And he nailed it spot on. And there was an interview, again, I wish I remember these things before I start doing a video, and I could find them for you in advance, where, I don't know if it was I don't think it was a former Secretary of State, but it was someone like, you know, the Assistant Secretary or something like that. And he was doing an interview, I think it was on 60 Minutes, I think. And they talked about how, you know, how rapidly legislation passed known as the Patriot Act right after 9/11, and it was how could somebody write that so fast? And he went on to basically say, well, legislation like that, believe it or not, is already pre-written. We kind of keep it on standby in case of an event so we could rapidly deal with the problem. And the guy or girl, whoever it was interviewing him, was like, wow, that's interesting to know. And they start talking about the internet and problems and potential threats, and they said, let me ask you a question regarding the internet. Is there a, quote, you know, patriotic legislation for the internet on standby? Yeah, you could say that. Something like that. Something along those lines. He says, yeah, there is. So that was years ago, by the way, that he did this interview. So if there's legislation on standby, and they say, well, we're going to try to pass it normally, and Congress, of course, says, no, we're not going to do it. There's just too much gross, you know, negligence in there regarding people's rights. We're not going to do it. Well, okay, call the Bush and buddies, call the military-industrial complex, guys. Let's roll with the internet problem. Go ahead, it's a go. And then you're going to hear a story about Iran or Syria or China. Somebody attacked our internet, knocked down the banking system, or knocked down just the internet, but crucial things may have stayed up, you know, whatever. Just enough to scare Congress again into passing this damn legislation. And I have a feeling the legislation that they'll end up passing will not be the one they're trying to pass next week. It'll be far worse than that one. Just like the Patriot Act was far worse than the original things they wanted passed during Oklahoma City. That, believe it or not, they didn't get passed. So they said, well, I guess that wasn't big enough. So let's do 9/11, then maybe we'll get these things passed, and we'll add a few more things in there because this is going to be a real big show. And they did, and they pulled it off, and it happened. So that's my little prediction, that if this internet thing doesn't pass next week, and they may not want it to pass, they may already know it's not going to pass, so that they can have a little issue with the internet, blame it on some bad guy, the sheeple will buy it, the government, congressmen, they'll buy it, and then they'll pass this new law that's even superior in their eyes to this one that they're trying to pass next week. Not superior in our eyes, it'll be devastatingly bad in our eyes, just like the Patriot Act and just like this executive order this lady's referring to, etc. And I also spent an hour or 40 minutes or whatever it was reading you almost the entire thing, probably 90% of that executive order, because it was so significant and not in a good way. And I've had conversations with people, I've argued with people, and said, you know, you guys argue about this crap, I support Obama, I don't, or this and that. Does any of you, did any person sitting here right now, and I said this at lunch one time, anybody sitting here right now read any part of, much less the whole thing, which you need to read, the executive order on just last week, at the time it was last week, March 16, 2012. Did you even hear about it? Were you even made aware that a pretty important executive order was signed into law? And if you did hear about it, did you go and read it? Not a peep. Not a damn sound out of anybody's mouth. Except for, nah, yeah, nah. Or not even, some of them was just like a little small shake, head shake, no, nah. You would think after me stating it that way, well shit, I better go see what old Joe is talking about if he's that, you know, into this thing. Sounds pretty important. Let me go take a peek at it. You think that happened? No. I don't have time for that. Good. Because I won't have time for your crap when you finally come to me asking and begging for things or help me out, this and that, what do I this, I got nothing for you. Go pound sand, bozo. That's what I'll tell them.